Hello, hello, and welcome to the King Heroes Journey podcast. My name is Beth Martins. We are live streaming to several platforms, and the new one today is Vigilante TV. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Lubomir. And fantastic. And I do have a very exciting guest today to speak with the filmmaker, and I'll introduce you properly in a minute or two. Just give me a second to let people come on, and we're going to get Rockfin going here. So this role has taught me to multitask big time. No doubt yours has as well.
Yeah, improvising on the battlefield.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, it's good training.
It is. Yeah.
Yeah. I talk about the warrior quite a bit in my work as an archetype, and that's the one that it reminds me of. So here we go. We've got Rockfin live. If anybody would prefer to be over there, then jump on. Also live on Rumble, it looks like that is live. Vigilante TV is live. Yay, super good. And the rest of them fake. We got Fakebook and my new YouTube. I lost my YouTube channel a little while ago, so I'm all decentralized.
Was there some sort of a free speech contention or?
Yeah. I was getting strikes fairly regularly, and I was 2 out of 3. And then I started talking about the archetypes of controlled op, and apparently that was the nail in the coffin.
Interesting. Well, congratulations. You touched
thank you.
Real. Yeah.
There you go. Yeah. I always like a little bunny innocently think, oh, they're never going to notice me. I just talk about archetypes and consciousness and healing, and it's like, oh.
Yeah.
So So Lubomir, I'm super glad to have you. If anybody is out there watching and wants to jump in the chat and say hi and has any questions, Lubomir is the creator of the film Kingdom. And this really caught my attention. Your previous films also caught my attention, but this one in particular, because it has such a distinct brightness to it and vision. And the film, I'll have to admit, might not have been alone the impetus to search you out and have you on. But when I heard you speak, that's when I knew that you're extremely deep in where you're coming from with your subject, and a fan of myth making, because otherwise we are at the mercy of the controller's myths. We just accept them and live accordingly. But people don't realize to the degree we are myth makers, meaning makers, and have so much more control over our reality for that reason. So just in case people are not familiar with Lubomir, he's an artist and a storyteller. His personal work explores the psychological, parapolitical, and spiritual dynamics that define the momentous time of transition we are collectively navigating. In 2017, he released his first award-winning animated film, In Shadow, A Modern Odyssey, exploring the fragmented consciousness of our times, followed by the 2024 release of Kingdom, a visceral audio-visual experience which maps out the initiatory path of empowerment. Beautifully spoken. Professionally, he has worked in various phases of production and IP development for both major and boutique animation studios, on a variety of film and TV projects for clients like Netflix, Warner Brothers, Blue Sky, Mattel Disney, that could be a conglomeration pretty soon, House of Cool, among others. His latest projects include directing the reimagined He-Man and the Masters of the Universe, and writing and directing the dystopian sci-fi short The Forest King for the Red Iron Road series. Lubomir is known for his kinetic visual style that weaves an eclectic aesthetic with mainstream appeal, and excels in crafting narratives that condense complex ideas into accessible and entertaining experiences. His artistic mission is to convey with clarity and reverence the sacred depth of the inner self and reveal the forces which seek to thwart it. So that's a beautiful bio, by the way. Not everybody can write those well. And hello to hello to artists here. I'm glad you're here as well.
Yeah, thank you. That that sounded really good coming from you. And yeah, having written it myself, it was nice having it read by someone else.
Oh, very good. Even yeah, yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's one of the hardest things. I am a business coach, by the way, so I was born and
Yeah.
raised in a marketing world and with my family's firm. So I always have an eye and an ear for that kind of thing.
Hmm.
And so we're going to dive in and talk about your work. If anyone is not familiar with the film, I'm just going to or I'd like to share a link directly to it. I'm realizing on my notes I don't have it direct, but this is where I first saw you speaking. So I'll just share this one out with producer Aubrey Marcus, which people might be familiar with. And don't tell him, but I think when he interviewed you, he talked too much and I didn't hear enough from you. So I'm like, I gotta talk to him.
Yeah, cool. I won't tell him.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would love to start by if you could just share with us how you came into the world of truth and freedom in the first place. I think you were many years ahead of the curve pre-pandemic, if we can call it that. Well, by the way, speak in some code just to
Yep.
preserve the integrity of the platforms.
Totally. Very wise. Yeah, it's interesting how we have to adjust our vernacular and be very artful with our expression, pointing to the right thing in an understandable way while being very intelligent, not to be sniped by the censors. So
Exactly.
it's kind of a fun game. It's a little frustrating, but I think it's fun. Yeah, how did I how did I get into the quote unquote truth side of things, and this unfolding sense of reality that we are all entering, or many of us are choosing to enter? I i think it was inevitable that, I can speak to you in these terms because I know, I've acquainted myself with your some of your work and purpose and divine mission and so on, and it was inevitable. I had always searched for what else is there. There was a great curiosity, and mostly in social movements and the organization of civilizations and kind of mainstream regular history, which led me into some philosophy, some Eastern studies, and through entheogens and psychedelics, having re-scrambled the regular context of the social order and reality, I was able to start integrating a variety, a greater body of data, sensory awareness, and even conceptual maps that I started comparing and overlaying on top of each other. And luckily, somehow my personality was able to be just open enough to new information, but also just critical enough to verify it and not go off the deep end, that I was able to skim some sort of a reasonable line while also navigating, clearing the fog of war more and more. And yeah, I would say that it was some of those, just that was increasingly the clarity that I'm getting is I'm quite indignified by the lack of dignity that is afforded to a lot of our humans, and the dignity that every human should be living with. And it's a choice. It's not bestowed upon anyone. Certainly, it's allowed by respectful actions and a cohesive and benign social order. Uh, but it is ultimately claimed by every individual. So, with my work, a lot of it is empowered by this indignation at the lack of dignity, and my increasing awareness of the love I have for the human spirit at its wholeness. Of course, I still harbor many shadows. I harbor my own, little demons that come up, and I'm doing my best in purifying all of that. But the reason I've created my personal works was out of that need to really truly raise a spiritual sword and cut through what is false. And the impulse is as pure as that. Everything else is the details of it manifesting in our reality.
I love that. That's amazing. So good. You're deep, which I like very much. I just want to go back and you're saying how it's fun to navigate the censorship, and that's such a beautiful attitude rather than going through all like grumbly. And I'm kind of the same way, childlike from my perspective, just like, oh, little roadblock. Oh, okay, I just go around this way, and that's fine, and no big deal, you know.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not going to sit and cry in my soup too much. And I also have a history of exploring the truth through hallucinogens. I kind of got cured of it. I feel like I've got enough truth to work with now, and I don't feel the need to go back. Or I might and might not, but it's amazing how. What do you think of the flip in society where those things used to be considered like illegal, immoral? I grew up on this message that drugs are dumb, and here's your brain on drugs, and all of that kind of thing. I know it's difficult to call those with that word, that it is much more appropriate to a pharmaceutical or some kind of lab made thing. But boy, you can't hold on to your world view very easily, especially if it's mostly manufactured and a result of programming. All of that veil tends to fall away. So I'm curious about your worldview and about your cosmology. How do you see the makeup of the spiritual world? I love that you love the human spirit. That's amazing, because many people have been trained to not love it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. Well, we're a special species, and I know there's sometimes some false modesty or self-hatred when we say, we're just animals that made it out of out of evolution or whatever someone may believe about that. And I don't think so. I think we are privileged to be in human bodies, to be given the ability to ensoul this material realm with spirit and be conduits for that. And we are conduits to this greater force to the degree that we purify ourselves from the illusions of the fallen world and its fallen culture. And it's that, again, it's a bigger game. And I do choose to see it as a game. I'm not always as lucid as that to be able to disidentify with some of the tormenting aspects of being a human. But being a human is a great gift, and we have this opportunity here as these standing rods, conduits of the spiritual and the material, to actualize both within our bodies. And that's more and more evident to me, and so that schema is what guides me. That's what guides my work, and that's what guides my orientation into becoming the man, the human that I would like to become. And the general cosmology that I have and I still study, though not as much of as late, a lot of esoteric texts, a lot of the sacred texts. I'm an autodidact. My education is art based, very practical art, animation school, painting, drawing, and those kinds of things. But I have studied on my own, and I've dictated my own curriculum. And but however, I love Steiner. I'm interested in some theosophy. There's many aspects, esoteric Christianity, some of the other world traditions, but ultimately I'd say the perennial philosophy, the perennial tradition, the golden chain of the so-called heretics that walk the earth, that are here to redeem the human spirit, and to bring forth what is I'm trying to avoid here cliche terms and terminology, but to bring on, let's just say, the integrity of this experiment at its highest level. And of course, that will not be achieved in our lifetime, but we are all steps in this ascendant ladder of both understanding this realm, enjoying all that it has to offer in material pleasures when we have the right orientation toward them, but also the spiritual aspect, the true, real capital R aspect that weaves in and holds and maintains all of that in place. And so, with the perennial wisdom, perennial tradition, weaving the esoteric myths and cultures, the way that they emerged in specific periods of time in specific geographic locations and had their cultural cloaks, on top of those mystical truths and the universal laws that men and women throughout the ages have uncovered, inferred, or just directly downloaded and tried to pass on. And as the cloak of the dark adversarial force continues in this evolutionary dance, trying to subsume and extinguish the flame of knowing and of being, it's those of us who awaken continually, life after life, and bring in the wisdom and we bring it in different languages and different forms and symbols, but always allying it to the reality, to the lived experience, because that's our anchor. Not inherited through, not just inherited. We can inherit the scaffolding of the myths, but we have to live them, to bring them, to revivify them. Maybe I'll leave it at that. Yeah.
Very nice. I love that. And about redeeming the human spirit, this is, I'm very down with that, let's say, and went through a Christian phase. I often say that just because it's had a little lifetime and a lot of disillusionment. And I come from Christian roots, so my ancestors were persecuted for preaching the gospel. I also have a great grandfather who was arrested for antagonizing the government, and I know their faith was a very big part of the clash that they were experiencing in Russia. But this concept of redemption hadn't really come in until the last 4 years, where that, what actually is healing, and then what's on the heels of healing is always redemption. You change your ways. In fact, this podcast was born of a lot of conflict in my life with my father, and I'm a recovering feminist. Maybe you saw that. And the podcast was to redeem myself, because he had passed, and I couldn't say, "Oh, I get it now." And I was really, brainwashed and conditioned by this cultural movement that was not organic at all.
Hmm.
And every time I, you know, bring a man forward, right? This was never my way. I was strictly working for women for a long time and rejecting men and demonizing men on the whole, that they were responsible for everything wrong in the world. And I just, as soon when the healing happened, it was not true anymore at all. And I gained this new respect for men in general, and much more openness, and then so much interest to look in through their eyes, and knowing that the balance between the masculine and the feminine is just so, like, not optional at all. They are two sides of the exact same coin. So I love that you're talking about redemption. That's the part from Christianity that I really pulled forward. Did you, you said, were you raised in a Christian context as well?
No, I wasn't. So
Okay.
I'm Bulgarian. Bulgaria is Eastern Orthodox Christian.
Okay. Okay.
We, post communism, Christianity started entering back into the country, but it's not really that popular. But yeah, I'm baptized as an Eastern Orthodox, uh, as an Eastern Orthodox child. But I think there are some very interesting elements in that tradition and that lineage.
Okay.
Yeah.
Do you, by the way, have a memory of the communism in Bulgaria, or were you too young?
I was too young, but the stories from my parents, my grandparents, and some of our family friends and others, of course, cultural artifacts now are the things that I have received. So not a lot
Mhm.
of memories. Yeah.
Right. It occurred to me over the last 4 years how many people from your region of the world that had been through communism were very quick to recognize it, and
Yeah.
quick to reject it, and not participate with it. So I wonder, do you think that had something to do with the direction you've gone?
Yeah, it absolutely did. It did. A lot of my Eastern European friends and family reacted in that way, in this immediate disbelief, and also and suspicion, and yeah, skepticism about everything that was happening. But also the double speak that's being used quite arrogantly right now in Canada and throughout the West as well. But in Canada, it has a specific insulting tone, like really this assumption that our population is really dumb, which I don't think is the case. But yeah. So recognizing that.
Very good.
Mhm.
And was there a turning point for you in the hero's journey? There's several stages I'm sure you're very familiar with, because all of art encompasses the hero's journey. Although, have you noticed in our, like, truly, modern, you can't call it art, but like mainstream movies and stuff, like, they are killing the hero's journey, that
Yeah.
that template. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, and people are missing it. They don't know what they're missing, but they are missing that aspect of it. Yeah, there's a lot of bypassing. Things are just given freely, and new storytelling, and their hardship and other things and that you'd see in mythologies are absent. The main gritty work.
Right. Yeah. And the point I
Yeah.
was going to make there is that you spend a great deal of your hero's journey on your own challenges and your own hardships and your own obstacles and shadows, as you called them, as I also do. But there comes a point in every single person, because I work with a lot of people one on one and in groups, and I'm there in the very privileged position to see them heal and transform before my eyes, before their eyes. And on the heels of that healing is always some desire to give back, some
Mm.
desire to bring that elixir, whatever they got, they instantly want others to have it. So, was there a turning point for you where you reached in your life where you knew you were needing to give back?
Yeah, well, I always had this impulse, even before going into art school and animation school. I had these impulses that I could remember, in just a swelling of inspiration in my chest and very vague visions of epic stories that would bring people on very deep emotional journeys. This is before any of my spiritual interests and pursuits. Then that actually actualized when I decided to make In Shadow and to quit my work so that I could weave this tapestry of a personal and collective unfolding of the darker aspects of our social order. And so that was meant as I really felt a lot of indignation, and I did feel a responsibility to use my skills and talent to open that up for more people. So I think that was the first time I felt that.
Right, and the
Yeah.
turning away of that work, when I was reading the list of, clients that you had, Disney, Mattel, Warner Brothers, Netflix, that couldn't have been easy.
Yeah, yeah, and luckily, don't think a lot of people still understand what In Shadow is. People who are more imbued and more tethered to a mainstream reality tunnel, and to people like you and I, that may seem very strange that someone would look at that film and not get what is happening. But I've witnessed that, and so it's almost like a scrambled code. But overall, yeah, I mean, a lot of my peers did not understand what that film was or what I was saying, and they couldn't quite grok where I stood. Like, should they be suspicious of me? Should I be like? So yeah, it's had its consequences, but you know how it is. I If I didn't make that film, I don't think things would have unfolded well for me personally, in my psyche and my body. It had to be done.
Right, and what
Yeah.
year was that? Was that pre-pandemic or just after? Because I know you had 2 films during these times.
Yeah, it was pre-pandemic. It came out in 2017. I had the idea around 2012, which was 4 years after my initial awakening to parapolitical schemes and machinations, and I got deep into that left brain research of the darkness of the world, and went through my paranoid stage, went through my despair stage, went through my everyone needs to know these things stage, and making sense of feeling disempowered in a strange world that seems to be organized against the human spirit, and then maturing in both my perceptions, in not seeing things such a polarized way, moving away from doom porn, and being just seeking out. Yeah, so to be honest, during COVID I got drawn back into that a little bit. There were a lot of salacious and unbelievable things that were happening that did outrage my human side. uh, but by and large, yeah, it's taken years to mature out of that and have a tempered mindset so that I could be generative instead of just recycling disempowering narratives in my head.
That's brilliant. Yes, that's exactly how I solved the pickle for myself when, everything, the crap hit the fan, and, I was taken out. As soon as I saw, oh my goodness, everything that everybody's been predicting is now on warp speed, and here it comes. And okay, do I just brace myself, put my head between my knees, prep, and that's it? My career is over, for example. And then I just prayed to God, what could I create right now that would help me move forward and be of service to people where they're finding themselves right now in this time? And instantly, I downloaded a great big, huge project to create a certification training in the archetype and deprogramming work that I do. Because I've always done this work, always intended to teach other coaches to do what I do. I thought it was way off in the future still, but God says it's now, Beth, and I'm like, okay. And this saved me. The
Yeah.
creativity saved me from the despair. And I love the word that you use, generative, right? Because is that not more our true nature as human beings?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, it's an overflow of energy, and it's intentional energy. That's what generativity is. And actually, it was around 2021 during lockdowns that came to me. I was having one of my, COVID lockdown baths. Not that we were luckily in Toronto in Canada, you didn't really have to obey anything very much. At least that was my experience. The police was actually quite good, and so freedom was there for all of us who wish to live freely, um, by and large, I would say. But yeah, during my sorry for that tangent, adding a lot of color to this commentary, but
It's good.
I remember seeing how the narratives were trying to infect me and infecting a lot of people who were not well informed and well versed in parapolitic, and realpolitik. And I noticed that there was a lot of degenerative thinking and theorizing, and it led nowhere other than disempowerment. And I was observing that the two streams of action and of thought were either the mainstream disempowerment or the alternative disempowerment. And I was
Right.
like, this is yeah, and I was like, this is a losing battle. And the word generativity came to me, and that's something I started applying as much as I could, as in, how can I, at the very start here, with generative thoughts, feelings, and visions, for first for myself, for those around me, my loved ones, and then the wider circle. How can I envision a more beautiful life instead of a life of reactivity, poverty, just survival? And so I think that's an extremely important thing. And that, in a way, invisibly, is something I try to weave in Kingdom as well. And that we have to choose that empowerment. If we don't choose it, we're constantly reacting to the bigger game that these other people are concocting for us. And I don't want to play that game, mostly out of a sense of dignity, again, which is, I'd like to make choices, my own choices, and not be a pawn. It's just the dignity of my soul. Yeah.
Yeah, that's beautiful. One of the things when you talk about vision, one of the things I do when I speak to someone, say new, that's interested in working with me, I always ask them what's their vision. I ask them, what are you stuck with? And also, what's your vision? Imagine you weren't stuck with these problems. What's the life that you would want? And sometimes they can't do it. They only know what they don't want. And they can't swap into that, now I'll call it generative place, where you imagine, like, what would it be like if, I remember for me, a very big uh, uh, moment of that was just the full realization of how unnatural everything is, whether it's our food, our water, our work life, spiritual life. It's just all totally distorted. We've got chemicals in the air and the food and everything every day, all day. And I'm just like, what would it be like if we were in a natural state, that we were as God made us? And how would things work? And how would I feel? And I just started to open, and I'm like, oh, I can feel that. I can
Mm.
actually sense that. I can see it. And it was, at the next level for me of being generative in that. So I would like to come back to that subject, but you've used the word parapolitic and one other one as well. So would you like to define where you're coming from, that parapolitic?
Yeah, and I made a mistake. I meant to say realpolitik, which is similar, maybe almost the same as parapolitics. So the parapolitical it's a term I like to use, and I picked up by one of my mentors, Neil Kramer. It's not his term either, but it's a term that is much more appropriate to use in discussions and quote unquote serious discussions instead of saying something that's conspiratorial, or because it's truly the branch of parapolitics, just like the paranormal is outside of politics as we see them, as they're portrayed through the controlled media. So it is actually the way politics work behind closed doors. The very top surface level of that, we all know about lobbying. That's, in a way, you could say parapolitics, but real parapolitics is the black budget projects, using intelligence agencies to enact certain changes, psyops, all sorts of, creating controlled opposition, backroom deals between countries, international Congress, like people basically meeting, like, Bilderberg Group, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if I should have mentioned that. Apologies. But
I think it might be first time on my channel, so maybe it's not a flag yet.
Yeah, but yeah, all these ways that politics is actually done, and is unlike the things we see in Hollywood, like, hello, Mr. President, welcome to Air Force One, and you're doing the best you can to save the world from an asteroid, and that's just not how it is. And so the more we are articulate in this language, and the more of a vocabulary we have in it, the better equipped we are to make sense of the world and how to navigate that for ourselves and our loved ones. So I'll just leave it at that, though. Yeah.
No, it's really good. And I became obsessed with controlled opposition. I didn't even really know what that was before 2020. I had no idea. I run in my lane and just focus on my own things. I know there's war out there, but just do my own thing. And then, as a podcaster, I've had many people on my show, and many of them were controlled opposition. And they were so eager to have a voice. And sometimes they would even approach me, somebody, of a big name who has a big audience, and they want to be on my show. And for 5 minutes, I think, oh, I'm so special. They love me. And then I realize, like, nope, there's an agenda here. And, I'm a pattern hunter. So I can hear, whether it's this person or that person, you can hear the consistency in their narrative and the words that they are pumping out, and how after some time of a more organic narrative had risen, well, they would co-opt that and take those words and phrases and make sure that, that was how we identified that they were a good and helpful guy. But yeah, that's a very useful word. I like that, parapolitic. And it interferes with our natural, or actually, I should phrase this as a question. How do you think that works with our natural ability to make meaning out of everything in our life?
Well, if I understand your question correctly, it orients us in our environment, and if we don't know the environment and the rules and laws that the environment has, then we are in wrong relationship as beings to it, and therefore we ourselves will get fractured and be disharmonious. So I feel that we are not separate from the order, the reality of our social makeup and the reality of nature, which is why in a romanticized, ancient, traditional society, I say romanticized because I'm not sure that this existed, but I intuit that it did, in which there is an actual hierarchy. And some people in the alternative sphere hate the word hierarchy, but there's actually a healthy hierarchy, simply because that's the order of existence. Let's say that even the spiritual realms will descend down from the highest order, from the monad, down into more and more of the legions and other aspects of beings and intelligences and forces, down into our realm of humans, plants, minerals, the physical realm, right? And so the hierarchy, sorry, sometimes I go way off in some of these things. I want to branch off in this giant tree, but to go back into to streamline it to what you had brought up is the hierarchy. Ultimately, ideally, we would want a social structure in which each soul born is guided within the social structure to achieve the greatest possible outcome for their soul imprint. And this is something actually that you're doing, right? That is your work. And no, apologies, it looks like one moment, actually. I need to connect my computer. Charger.
No problem. Take your
Did
time.
not do. It was about to die. Okay, we are back online.
Oh,
So a social order in which there's a hierarchy in which it's led so that each one can achieve their full soul's mission and this plane of existence. In such a place, people don't compete to all be, to have the American dream unfold. People, in a way, accept what their soul aspects are, and accept that their life purpose is such as it is, and it's noble regardless of where it is. I bring that up because right now our society is clearly in disarray and is far from that ideal. And I say that ideal because for now it seems like I said, like a romantic picture of reality. And I know that throughout the ages, throughout the way that we move through cosmic influences, we have ebbs and flows. And here we are in this contentious time, and there's a reason and a purpose for it. And our souls are using it for those reasons and purposes. But at the same time, we are obviously observing that it's fractured, that it's not well, that it's twisted and sick, and it's seeking to tarnish and destroy the purity, the nobility of souls. And so parapolitics and that awareness basically lets us know and diagnose what is wrong, what is right, where things could be, so that we have a realistic metric for our path through it all. And if we are not doing so, we just become puppets, pulled whose strings are pulled by forces outside of our own management. And that's just not the optimal way to do it.
right, exactly. And we are conditioned for that. It reminds me of one of the programs I help people release that is about control. So in the spiritual world, they're always saying, let go of control. And in my direct experience and put to the test with a couple of near-death experiences, it turns out we have control. That's something God gave us. And it's not negotiable. You can't not be in control. But the programming is that you lack for control. So we see through this box of it. And one of the versions of this program is wanting to be controlled. And so this is very deep in our society where we've been trained, as long as we are controlled, then we are safe. And that did take care of, like you said, half or more of the population that already were more like, I would say, bunnies or prey, or less predator, more bunny. And then there's the other side of us that they had to plan for. And we were well planned for. I'm almost honored that they saw us coming so much I actually think there's a greater investment in so-called our side of this freedom movement than there is in the mainstream. They're kind of easy. You just scare like boo, and they're, oh, okay, I'll do whatever you like.
Yeah.
Whereas we're more tenacious with our own meaning, with our own myth making.
Yeah.
And that can work for or against people. It's something that we need that, right? I think the most desperately unhappy people, especially if you project towards death, they don't have meaning in their life. And even to me, it's a kind of living death when you can't put meaning and purpose to your life. So how do you, probably through your art in particular, how do you impart that? How do you teach that? And I'll just preface it by saying that when you start to look deeply into anybody's worldview and cosmology, they're all different. Like all of them. There's so many people that I respect and have interviewed and I read about, and they're all saying something different. There's some overlap as well. And it's amazing people aren't in more conflict, although that happens a lot. But this mechanism of making meaning, do you feel like you're teaching about it? I'm sorry, I can't even come up with a question about that, but if you want to speak to any of that.
Yeah, no, I can infer a direction from that. Yeah, so the way that I create, so I will just quote In Shadow and Kingdom here. And there's another film I made, The Forest King, which is something else that has to do with technocratic concerns. But those two films were inspired by a more visceral reaction, or response to what I was seeing around me. And I did feel an urgency to put them out. Now, I could have gone the direction of writing an essay, writing a book, or communicating in some sort of oral way about it. But because I was already trained in the visual arts, and there's something about imagery that comes to me, which helps me define the world, I wanted to share some of my inner world and how I see things symbolically. My close friends, they know I come off more serious when I speak in these formal settings, but there's quite a comedic side to me, and sometimes maybe too much so. And in that comedic side, I do mock and lampoon a lot of the social things, a lot of the quote unquote rulers and others, and the absurdity that we're seeing in this theater. And so some of that does come through in a more deranged way in my art. But what I'm trying to impart is really a feeling and a reaction, not so much an intellectual or intellectual understanding. An intellectual understanding is very important, which is why my art, by and large, in a way, preaches to the choir and gives and activates people that are already on the path. But it also, based on my correspondence and a lot of the reactions, a lot of people do have breakthrough experiences with this work. And I just want to say that, to me, that's a very, I feel the honor and privilege of that actually happening through my work twice now, with Kingdom and with In Shadow. And I'm very grateful that this work has been able to come through me in this way and be helpful to people. But yeah, the net result is I have seen a lot of that already from Kingdom 3 weeks in since its release. And so my intention here is not to impart theories, but it's more to activate something deeper in the soul essence or the psyche of the human, so that then they can have that that inner embodied energetic pump up that then leads into action and leads into transformation, right? And so for me, those have always been the most powerful experiences in my life. I love dancing. I love movement. So my expression of the physicality comes from an impulse to react to vibration of sound. And so that aliveness is spirit meeting matter. And so these transmissions, these symbolic transmissions of my art, are really meant to, in this barrage, this tapestry of a 13-minute compacted narrative, are meant to build an image upon image upon image of something that creates an understanding that leads to some sort of shift, hopefully, or maybe with repeated viewings, that then imprints visuals that are simple enough that we can think back on when we're taking action in some other aspect of our lives. And I've seen, even friends will tell me they see parts of In Shadow and some of the grimaces of some of the hollow, puppet-like people when they watch a press conference, or someone will see like, oh, I felt like I saw the red box go inside his head, and then he just glazed over. And like those kind of symbols, it feels really good to have been able to provide some of those tools. So it's, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. And I'm going to quote you: aliveness is spirit meeting matter. Right? Because we can't just be spiritual beings. That's not what we are. We are, I think, according to Ben Balderson, as an alchemist, I don't know if you're familiar with him, but he says we're the only animal on earth, or the only living being that is the half spirit, half animal, half spirit, half flesh. And there's an imperative behind it, that it must be expressed, it must be manifested, it must come to some kind of fruition, right? When you think about just meditating on a mountain for your whole life, it's not like you'll get to the end of the life and go, oops, missed the boat on that. Also, you can't underestimate the like you said, the emotional understanding. And that's what I feel is so both valuable. Like it's a two-sided coin, the full media with the sound and the pictures. It's really just sound and pictures. It's funny, it seems like a lot more going on in your animation there. And and how evocative that is at the emotional level, that if you're just reading an article and the details, you might not have that emotional response that brings you to a place of actually changing your behavior or doing something different or being more positive. And it's also an element that has been used very nefariously, and it's so much of that controlled op stuff in the true so-called truth space. They used media, right? There would be the creepy music in the background, and I would always like, oh, they want me to be afraid now, and oh, they're now they want me to feel sorry for this or that or myself, and just how calculated that emotional manipulation is. And it- so obviously it can be used for good and bad intentions.
Oh
And
yeah.
yeah, so where do you find yourself in that, knowing I kind of know the answer to this question, but I'm curious how you would answer it. Like, how do you keep a check on yourself in terms of scaring people and all of that kind of stuff?
Yeah, like, is it having a net negative effect or a net positive effect, kind of, or for sure. So one of it's so the audio visual medium that we've had for the last century plus is to me is high magic, and I'm fascinated by it. I was naturally pulled in utilizing it, learning it, and creating it. And I find that with something like In Shadow, it's mostly elucidating the darkness. And for some people, it's too much, and for some people, it's not necessary. And for them, I would agree. But here is my general philosophy. And more as I am creating, I have greater understanding and greater being, the more I want to create empowering works. However, in the totality of the human experience, the totality of my experience, I also have darkness, constriction, limitation, and that's simply part of this realm. And if I were to deny it, I would not be one wise, and I would not be very honest. Now, if I only stick to that part and that's all I do and embellish that through my pain body and just, spew trauma out into art, then that's not very good for the culture either. And that would be a disservice. So my approach is ever more balanced, but I find great beauty in the texture of darkness simply because it's part of our existence and there's much good fruit there. It's not something to be abolished, not that we can. It simply is another facet of this existence. And the more courageous, open, and expansive we are, the more we can expand and hold that darkness without being annihilated. And of course, there's more to that. Of course, we don't stare into the darkness for too long. There's wisdom, and of course, in how to deal with it. But so for me to really be of service and really go into the path of empowerment and add to this cultural, spiritual battle that we are in, is to show in a different way and outline the darker aspects that we may not be aware of, because that is a necessary white magic that we need to be doing, right? And so many of our peers are doing this as well. And with my specific gifts and talents, I just wanted to do it in a different way, from a different perspective. One thing that I see a lot is specifically in the left-right divide, which is such a useful tool of false dichotomy that empire uses. You have people are easily pattern matched based on the vocabulary and the vernacular that they use. And so, unfortunately, a lot of well meaning people continue to use the same old terms. I see it all the time. And that continues to perpetuate a divide between souls who, for the most part, whether they're on the left or right, even though they may be confused on one side more than the other, I would say, um, ultimately are oriented toward the good, what is true and real, but there's all the shadow within them that doesn't allow them to see truth. And so by not being artful with our words, with our vocabulary and vernacular, by not constantly redefining the space that we're in, but using the same old verbiage, we're trapped in a silly game of one fortress shooting at the other, and that's all. So with this visual medium, I was just trying to, which is why even in Shadow, people from all sides of the political spectrum, if we look at the politics, reacted to it because they saw in it deceit and complicity and darkness. They saw all these aspects that are true to them. um yeah.
Yeah, it held up quite a mirror to them. And yeah, so that's interesting because if say you just had the light and not the dark in depiction and symbology and the artistic expression of that, it wouldn't come across as real in our world, right? Because we do have the light and the shadow going on as a matter of reality, like that's what is. And so and I'm also a fan of busting ascension myths and because we get into a trap. I see you smile. Good, that's great. We get into a trap of feeling like we're going from dark to light, and then also I have a little bit of an argument with the pitting the dark and the light against each other as if they are opposites. And I don't think that's true. I think it's been enfolded into the paradigm of opposition that we have in our mind. And many people have concluded that the darkness is necessary, a necessary ingredient. It just is part of life. And, to integrate it, to make friends with your shadow, all of that kind of thing. And it ends up on this chasing of it's like actually one or the other, the glorification of shadow or the complete denial of shadow and chasing of our lighter frequencies, which in my experience, God is not any of that. Not the low,
Mhm.
not the high, right? So by idealizing the high, it's put a lot of people into denial about what's real and
Yeah.
and going on. So what do you see as the ultimate goal of your own existence? No pressure.
Oh, oh boy. Good one. Well, yeah, I just want to say, let me answer that. Maybe I'll think about it in the background, but I just wanted to say respond to something you just said, which is inevitably we fall into darkness or lower periods in our life, and if we're not equipped to know them and understand them, then we will be taken over in an even greater way than we would have previously by avoiding them. So it's also just very pragmatic to be acquainted with those aspects, with those ebbs and flows, so that we don't drown when they come. Because to think that we can go into a place of simply just goodness and just things being completely, yeah, just problem free is pretty immature. And I understand it, because I still, those moments within my own psyche come up, because it's wishful thinking of the pristine reality without entropy or any challenges. But it's simply, that's not the realm we're in right now. Those are not the laws that this reality functions under. And but yeah, sooner or later life teaches us anyway. So now, to your question, what was it? What's the highest mission in my life, or
Yeah,
actual?
like where is all the work heading for you? Is there a kind of destination, or like what would awake mean to you, or dare I say enlightenment? I don't like that word anymore. But what do you feel like you're ultimately working towards? And that could be both practical and spiritual.
Yeah, so that is still a living question, and I'm discovering it. And at the same time, I do have a living answer, and the living answer is right now is it's nothing extraordinary, but in its actualized form, I think it is extraordinary, and that is more presence, more awareness of the moment, but not simply awareness through my personal ego, but really moving into and expanding into my environment. I'm being actually very explicit here and detailed, but I think it's important. So because to me, that is the foundation of existence. It all starts from this here now. And from this embodied place of really owning. I think this is actually a very lately I've been realizing a great sign of deep masculinity, if one wishes to function under that, is real claiming of the matter that one's consciousness is tethered to, and real ownership and responsibility. And I see that specifically in the way that I carry and occupy my body, and the way that extends into my environment, to my partner, into my woman, into the creatures in our life, like the animals, the space that I am in. and from there aligning to higher intelligence, to God. And I don't want to make big claims, but that is the goal. And then feeling into what needs to happen immediately here in this environment with all the emerging phenomena. So I don't know if that makes sense to everyone, but really it's like, to me, it's the essence of it all, because that's where all decisions for career, for relationships, for what do we do this weekend? How do we have fun? What party do we host or go to? All those human concerns come from that place and how we show up, because it's clear, it's pure, it is in good relationship with the persona, which we can play with, we can show up with, we can dance with, we can joke with, but it's not attached to it. So that is ultimately the goal, because all the higher, loftier goals of being part of a beautiful community or building a better world, and those are beautiful goals, but if I'm coming at them from my inherited memory patterns and all kinds of other debris, cultural debris, etc., it's just it's more stories without substance. So I'm trying to be very honest and calibrated with my here now experience, which is the eternal. So yeah, that's the
Well
game.
done. Well done. Yeah, I don't think I asked that question so deep, but I figured you could handle it. That's really good. Hey,
Thanks.
before yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Before I forget, I wanted to shout out to Josh Del Sol, who introduced us, and he's the one that sent me your film originally that I hadn't seen, and it was a wow. So just want to make
Yeah.
sure and thank him.
Yes.
Uh,
Thanks to Josh Dosol.
yeah, yeah. Those deep questions that we can only really answer for ourselves. We were at an event. I probably shouldn't say what it was on the weekend, and a lot of old guys and pretty conservative here in Manitoba. The ones that are, say, defending our right to own and use firearms, for example. And he was saying, like, yeah, we put no end of energy into means to destroy people and things and everything. And then I was like, yeah, and is that us? Are we is it the ones who are like us, if there's an us that did that, or are there two potential walks of life? And have you ever explored that? I've had Mark Archer on, where he talks about two atoms in the origin story that we don't know about, and us with all of those choices that you're talking about that come down to every single moment of life, and those in his perspective that do not have the choice. Do you
Mhm.
see those divergent?
Yeah, that's such a fascinating question. So more like inherent NPCs, non-player characters that are you familiar with that term?
I
Or
am familiar. I slightly reject it, but
yeah.
yeah, it's say the ownership of what we're doing here is very, very high for us, because we have the choice to choose life or choose death at every moment. And then his theory being, there are those that don't have that power, and then he would
Mm,
call them elites, and the psychopaths that are able to spray us with poison every day, and without any conscience, by appearance, to bring nothing but harm and struggle to people. So where do you think that comes from? Is that human or something else?
yeah, and when you say that, do you mean is that evident mostly in this managerial class, or would you say that also exists in the civilian population and the various classes of people?
I guess the theory is that where it exists more in average people, it's a choice rather than just their their makeup.
Okay, so for these people, the hypothesis here is that it is their makeup, in a way, almost a function of what they are as creatures.
Exactly.
So I think, yeah, since we're going into this territory, I do think there is the influence of a non-human force here, and so I try to avoid the canon of different works. Like, let's say we can go in the Gnostic route and we could talk about the archons, and that could be valid. We could go into the Old Testament and some of the non-canon books like Book of Enoch and talk about the Nephilim, and them being stuck, fallen angels being stuck in the intermediary realms and influencing humans. Because I'm not so well versed or fully confirm any of these things, I, based on all of that and my own inner sensing and my own inner experience, I basically collapse it down to this darker adversarial force. I simplified it extremely in Kingdom, but it is something that I see with these humans when I feel into myself, my own darker traumatized parts from the past and the present, and just when I feel into the intuitive knowing of what it is to be a human being. I could see that the influence of this force enters through trauma and actually the denial of trauma, because when we deny trauma, I clearly see that we enter into evil. I've seen that in myself in very dark periods, and I see that in others. So when we don't acknowledge our own pain, we do offload it onto others, and we do the most absurd things, as Jung has pointed out, just to avoid seeing that shadow. And so we do become monstrous, and we become mechanical. Mechanical and evil to me are often synonymous, because evil is a product of unconsciousness, and unconsciousness is mechanical because it functions based on patterns, and these patterns basically harvest energy. And what I mean by that is harvesting energy is just a way of feeding this dark pattern. For instance, tormenting another human being to get the satisfaction of their pain and the power over them, that creates a certain energetic charge that feeds that mechanical pattern. And so I see that this darker force moves through that unhealed and unrealized trauma of these individuals, and then creates incentive structures through other people in the managerial class that then traps these humans who don't really know the game that they're playing. They're more in an unconscious, mechanical, therefore evil game. And they basically, there's just a more complex structure that organizes. And that's why you can really, if you annihilate 1, 2, or 100 of these people, it doesn't really matter, because it's cutting the Hydra's head off, because there's a template, there's an energetic template within these structures, and more of the same people will just come in to fill those positions. But I think what it's all pointing to is the fact that we've created a vacuum collectively by not owning our own power, energy, and creativity, and this is just an aspect of being human, right? Over time with the civilization, we disavow more and more of our responsibilities of making decisions in a certain culture, and we kind of fall asleep to being managed. And because we were all children once, when we grow up, we're still by and large children, and we want to be taken care of by larger structures. At this point, mom and dad are not there, but something else and other structures are there to take care of us. And that makes sense. Reality is complex. But that's when we fall asleep, and that's when this vacuum is filled up by deranged and aberrant creatures. So
Yeah, where
yeah,
you create a space, something is going to fill that. If you don't fill that, something will.
yeah,
Used to say,
yeah,
create your life or someone else will.
yeah,
And
totally.
yeah, I was going to say as well that it, in a way, it kind of gives, as I'm considering, because in those say societies, in the managerial, as you called it, elites, there is, from at least, if it's true what we're learning, there is a great deal of trauma-based mind control used on those people. So it actually kind of speaks to me of there not being a divergent race. Why do they need to over and over and over and over again? And it's not even a one and done, right? It must be done periodically to continue scaring the population, even those that believed in the boogeyman virus. If you don't remind them every day about it, they forget. There's a
Yeah,
natural forgetting of the pain and the fear and the trauma. So yeah, it kind of in a way gives more credence to what you're saying, that very interesting. I like how you use the word mechanical to equal evil. Is that fair? A fair
yeah,
paraphrasing of what you said? Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
it's fair.
Yeah.
Or yeah, evil is mechanical. I'm not always sure the
Okay.
mechanical is evil. It's more neutral, but I think evil is mechanical because it has a set of rules that it needs to abide by. Whereas the conscious good and love, of course they have some sort of higher pattern, but it's not so mechanical. And I think it's much more open to just like emergent things. Yeah, but
Yeah,
I'd like to add, I don't know if you had a question, but I'd like to just add one thing
please.
here, and it's the force that's moving through a lot of us and a lot of the managerial class especially. But what we're seeing right now with the technocratic push to to make a synthetic life out of everything and replace anything from, I mean, humans to produce to plant life to eh, I mean, even thoughts and emotions being synthetic so that they could be tokenized and put on some sort of ledger and can be managed and measured and issued, prescribed. That whole movement right now is the most troubling aspect of being alive and human at this point in time. And I see it as an incredible invasion of humanity, but by something that I truly see as trying to move through and birth itself. We could address this in a mythopoetic way, like as an allegory that it's birthing itself through us, or we could go into more of the esoteric stream and say that there is an actual intelligence, an entity. At this point of the conversation, collective conversation, I don't think that it matters because we're making sense of it. But I've been tracking that even pre-COVID, and when COVID came through, I saw it's really speed up. But this obsession by disembodied humans, disembodied meaning very identified with their intellect and with the conceptual world and with not with nature, those beings are the ones that are bringing in a lot of these higher technologies in somewhat of an unconscious way, I would say. And I think they are influenced by other forces which are seeking to embody synthetic bodies, synthetic human bodies, synthetic all sorts of other digital constructs, computer systems, and through them start influencing the human realm, which can only be unsold through a special way that's beyond our control, right? Souls can come into these bodies by a completely different order than what these intelligences may be trying to do. So yeah, that's a very exciting conversation, and I think it's at the cutting edge of what may really be happening. And of course, what I said needs to be substantiated by a lot more data, narratives, esoteric lore, and also a lot of emerging science. But it's I think we will be contending with this in the decades to come, and those who don't see it, unfortunately, will probably be subsumed by its mechanical tentacles as it creates systems for people who don't want to think to live under.
Oh yeah, that's a lot right there. I was
Yeah.
there's a parallel in the programming, and I don't talk about programming. I have learned and been trained to actually see it as a blueprint. It is an energetic architecture inside of ourselves. Once you learn to actually identify it and that it is a program, it is exactly that. It's mechanical. It is an artificial intelligence that you installed. They can't come along, as far as I can tell. Nobody could install that for you. They can make circumstances where you're very likely to install the programming and reinstall and layer incredibly, but it has that exact quality where it's just, once you turn it on, it just goes until you tell it not to run anymore. It's just gonna, and it's got your energy, not its own energy. So
Mm.
yeah, and I've been watching too much Star Trek lately. I had no intention ever in my life of going back to like movies and episodes, but it became relevant because there is actually quite a bit of the origin stories through Mark Archer's eyes. He's a fan of Star Trek, so we started watching a few episodes in my House of Free Will private association, and then I'm hooked. And every time my brain is like melting, but I don't want to go to bed, I'll turn on some of that. And they're very, very um, intent on pushing that transhuman agenda and constantly making us fall in love with figures like Data or even Spock, that was the half human and emotionless, much more mechanical in his decisions and logical. So that's
Mhm.
a long time in the installation, never mind space itself. I don't know where you stand in the cosmology of the realm that we're in. But
Yeah. Like,
yeah,
I feel there's something alive I'd like to say that was inspired by what you just said. It's
yeah,
interesting because the data or data, I forget his name. Do you pronounce it data or?
yeah, I think they, yeah,
But let's just say these more transhuman, emotionless creatures, there's an appeal to them because of the unruly and extremely painful and confusing emotional body that we carry. Now, it's interesting here that we have these two options if we go into stark polarity. One option to deal with this inheritance of our own early life and of our genetic lineage of these emotional, somatic wounds that also enrich us. We can either take them into our own hands and with the right guidance transmute them into a greater state. It's the work that you're doing. In a way, I'm aiming to do that with my work. The other way that we deal with that is we suppress, we completely cordon those off into an emotionless sort of transhuman creature, right? And that's where we venerate the intellect. We venerate only the material human intellect, and we completely deny any other existence beyond that. So but like the latter, I get it, I understand it, but it leads to entropy, and it leads to a dead end ultimately. So it's just not the optimal way to do it. And if we do go with the hypothesis that souls do reincarnate and develop over time, then you will have to relive this again, and it will be more painful. So if anyone who subscribes to that chooses to go to the transhuman route, I would say just you know cut that whole game off and just play the right way, do the work now.
exactly. That's what my near-death experience taught me. There was no escape. If my body was to be left behind at that moment, I didn't get out of my obligations to
Yeah.
my soul's evolution. That,
Hmm.
yeah, there's literally no way out. Go ahead.
I have a question about that. I'm not sure if you've talked about this much. I don't know it. If you don't mind, what was that experience like? How did you receive that knowing? Was it a visual, somatic? Was it just a knowing in your body, or was it someone telling you?
It was on the heels of surrendering to death
Yeah.
because I'd been fighting and fighting and fighting. And then finally, I felt like the fight was over, the fight was gone, and I let death have me. And in dying, I discovered some things that there's no death, and I knew that again intellectually because I've been already trained spiritually and had a guru in India, and all of the immortality philosophy was already installed, so to speak. But when you come face to face with death, it's different than all your ideas about death and immortality. And so, it was that meeting that of reality is like, okay, my body is becoming lifeless. I'm going to stop fighting. I gave over to it, went into the darkness that wasn't dark at all. Turned out it was full of life and
Mhm.
full of revelation, including this, that there is no way out, and the inner motive to look for that escape that we are heavily, intensely programmed with, because the emotional world is so weaponized against us. And you said that, like, it's a painful, stark, can be every day wrestling with the emotional experience. And so,
Yeah.
yeah, that was one of the revelations that was on there, that I had a distinct purpose. It's not just about what I do; it was about the people I was connected with. It was a state of complete fulfillment where I
Mm.
realized I never again needed to do anything to fulfill myself, because that I saw was my true nature, whether I lived or died through that
Mm.
moment. So I don't know if
What a
that helped.
wonderful experience. Yeah, and it all came as a knowing to you, those aspects. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, I'm not
Yeah.
super visual. I'm always amazed when I get visual experiences. Yeah, it was a knowing, a download of data I still am decoding to this moment.
Wow. Amazing.
Yeah, yeah. Thank
Mm.
you for asking. Yeah.
Mm.
So let's see. One of the things I was just going to say also is that, because if we stay on the subject of the transhuman revolution, or whatever they're calling it, it is, to me, extremely polarizing. that there are people that will just run to it like a moth to a flame, and the others, like me, I'm just going to go no. I was reading a definition that AI generated for me on my Brave, of all places. You think that the Brave would be somehow immune to all of that, but no.
Hmm.
And I'm reading the definition. As soon as I realized it was AI generated, I rejected it. Like, yeah, that's not even just play with that. Let's go to some, more human generated meaning.
Hmm.
And that polarization is actually to our favor, right? I think, to force us to make a choice in the right direction.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And your work, I think, is very polarizing as well. Go ahead.
Uh, yeah, no, I would just agree that our realm of existence is a polarized one, and polarity are the two anchor points between which we experience reality, in the gradient, in the spectrum of those 2 points. So, because otherwise we would not have any movement or change. So it is a necessary part.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in creating your film work, are you actively polarizing? Do you know that you're going to create images and sounds and storylines that are going to turn people completely off as well as draw in?
Yeah, I do anticipate that. I haven't had a very strong express reaction of the that people being triggered by it. Um, Not sure why. I've been lucky to mostly receive positive reactions, but yes, I do know that does happen, and that's just part of it. If I Because some parts of my work are meant to disturb, meant to shake, and meant to maybe even shock, depending on one's level of awareness. And I think that's necessary. We are in a time of crisis. We could also see it as a time of emergency. And at the same time, I am calibrating my images so that it's not actually hurtful to people unnecessarily, out of my some sort of vengeful artistic choice, to just hurt the others, or the ones that I may be fighting against, or something like that. I'd like to affect the most people as possible, which is why these are digital spells. I try to calibrate them as much as I can for them to be effective without triggering someone to turn off the video. And of course, without being censored by the AI algorithm, which will probably become more and more sophisticated. But yeah, I don't want to turn people off, but nor do I want to cater and to then weaken the imagery. So it's a fine balance there.
And it actually is a sign that you haven't had the negative reactions. It's a sign of polarizing really well.
Mm.
Because when you do it to its more inherent level, or to I don't even know how to say that, but I think you get my meaning. When you polarize really well, you don't get a lot of negative feedback. Those people just simply turn away, turn it off. They don't come after you. It's when you're wishy-washy and you're trying to live between the worlds and please everybody and not offend anyone or offend everybody. That's when you really get the attacks.
Yeah, I agree. I think that's exactly when it happens. It's an interesting phenomenon. People that tune out and just don't get it. That to me has been very, very interesting to witness. And yeah, it does happen. They just sort of fall away.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, I recommend it as a strategy for business too, because you
Mm.
don't want a lot of people around you who wants to be in a work environment that's, especially a fully purposeful one, where you're always troubleshooting some, I want to swear, person rebel without a cause, or they just are wired to make trouble, so they're on your doorstep making trouble for you that day. And you see it a lot actually in the truth world, where there's just this big war go on in the chats, and
Mm.
trolls galore and everything like that. And I've always gone out of my way to expose myself to a great enough degree that you either like me or you don't like me, and you just leave me alone.
Nice. Yeah. So they know what you stand for. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good call. Yeah, it's also a feature of the alternative sphere is we're not all playing the same game. We think we're all oriented toward truth, but a lot is projections, egoic projections, unmet formal needs, and So that's why it leads to a lot of infighting. But also, we don't have a coherent cultural myth that we're all shooting for, and I think we are slowly constructing that. But yeah.
And how does that work, constructing the myth that would be more helpful to us? Obviously, what
Mhm.
you're doing, creating the images and the sounds and storylines.
Yeah, more of that, more action is, I think, what it requires. A lot of
Nice.
people are going through a healing journey as well, which is absolutely necessary, and yet people can get stuck in picking on wounds forever, especially intelligent people, people who have cognitive capacity to understand a lot of ideas, will tend not to go into generative action in the world. And right now, I would say specifically for my dear brothers and the men, just virtuous action is needed and it's necessary. So courageous, virtuous action in the world, and I don't mean that in some sort of I don't mean protest or anything. I just mean constructive action of building new things and leading with the example of leading a virtuous life, of being a good human. Of course, this speaks to all of us, men and women. But I say that to men because I've been part of various men's groups. I do even some coaching of men, and
Awesome.
excuse me, and because I've gone and still going through, we're always on quote unquote healing journey, because we're really just making the unconscious conscious, and that to me is the healing journey. But I I do think that we need to be taking action. So this common vision and this thing that's emerging is, we have to tap into the nobility, something that really inspires us deep in here, day after day, and be conveying that to each other, and be in communication and communion about the vision of what is possible. Like the way that you outlined earlier, it's very difficult for a lot of us to know what is possible, because all we know is what we've known in our history, what has been allowed to us, both in our family, what we've allowed to ourselves, and what is allowed to us culturally. So initially, it is very difficult to think outside of that. I know that my journey in still moving outside of my own self imposed limitations is, I will get actual somatic feelings of the various negative things that pull me back from a certain vision. And that just it caves me back into old visions, old patterns, and pulls me away from this noble, extended, expansive vision. So yeah, I think a lot of it has to do with being courageous enough to envision something new, being bold enough to voice it, being intelligent enough to give a structure of what that would look like and what the steps are to it, and having enough charisma and authenticity to make that feel like it's exciting, because it is to all those around us. So something
Mhm.
something like that, holding the torch.
Nice, nice. I like how you attribute the quality of nobility to it. It is a noble thing. And it comes across so that's why I love to interview someone about their passion, their what they truly are here to do and enact and create. I like asking people, especially when I'm first meeting them in my world, how would you finish the sentence? Wouldn't it be nice if?
Hmm.
And maybe I'll put that to you as a question right now, if you don't mind.
Sure, just in general, right? um yeah.
Like you said, it's so difficult to think out of what we've been taught is possible, or what we think is possible, or what we
Yeah.
even know is possible. Yeah.
Yeah, I would say, wouldn't it be nice if we were able to interface with nature and speak to her, and receive, yeah, use her language? Wouldn't it be nice if we could be actually festive in a large group of people, and not be concerned with how we appear, seem to be, or come off? Yeah, wouldn't it be nice to truly connect with other human beings from a real sense of ourselves, vulnerable but not losing our power? Mm. Those feel good for me.
Those are really good ones. Nice, nice. That was
Mhm.
like music. Very well done.
Mhm.
Awesome.
Mhm.
And so what's on the horizon for you? Where do you feel your creative generative energy moving now that you've got? I mean, Kingdom is only 3 weeks old. Are you kidding me?
It is, yeah. It's only 3 weeks old.
Okay, time's going fast.
Fresh and young, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Can't
Yeah, I'm.
recommend it enough if anybody hasn't seen it for some reason. I'm going to grab a link to it if my
Yeah, yeah.
system.
Please watch. I recommend it as well.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Of
Thank
course,
you.
of course.
What's in the horizon? I don't have an immediate project ready to go. These projects do come at times when I feel they're needed, and I sit down and I make them, and it takes time and takes resources. So I think what's exciting me for the future is finding more decentralized ways of creating the new mythologies, and it's a matter of quality people within this storytelling sphere coming together and making that possible. It requires a vision and it requires a path into that direction. I'm not sure what that means exactly. I do have some projects in mind. I wish we were at a time where I could just tell stories that are not necessarily urgent or in service of the degradation of our world. I wish I could just tell human stories that interest me, to explore psychology and the various pockets of human experience. And maybe that time will come. But for now, I am mission oriented, and I am also listening to my intuitive sense of what needs to be next. So we'll see. There are a few things on the table. We just have to figure out the structure around it and how that can be possible.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's a certain curse in the scale of your art that it is huge if people don't realize what goes into filmmaking. It's I'm working with creating my audiobook right now, and it was easy enough to record. Well, actually, it's hard to record, but that was the easy part. Now I'm in some edits, and I was like, oh boy, this is hours and hours and hours, and then video multiplies that exponentially. I know.
Yeah.
And like you said, it requires resources, it requires input from maybe more than just yourself. So, do you have ways also that you can express more quickly for yourself? Or no, I'm not rushing you or anything like
Yeah. Yeah,
that.
no, it's the so I see myself as a communicator, and lately I've been claiming that much more. So I do like utilizing the written word, and I do have a Substack,
Ah,
but I have not been very regular with it. I do have quite a few things I'd like to write about there, and perhaps I will invest more time into that because I could convey a lot more ideas there. But of course, my unique strength is the audio visual medium and dramatizing reality. So yeah,
mhm,
it's still a
mhm.
living question.
Right on, right on. Yeah,
Yeah.
I have a friend that he grew up in Cirque du Soleil at 16. He ran away from home and joined the circus and had a 30-year career with them. Ended up owning two companies and putting on these massive productions that did cost, thousands and thousands of dollars to produce. And then now on the other side of it, it's over for him. On the other side of it, it's kind of like, well, what now? Because it
Mhm.
all required such huge resources where I think personally kept myself a little bit smaller so that everything's manageable with me or just like a few contracting inputs of some kind.
Yeah.
But good on you for having a big vision like that.
Hmm. Yeah. Thanks. But
It is.
I think we're entering a time where we are going to have our own personal industries, and we have to be free from the clutches of the system as it becomes more constricting. And depending on the measures that they try to bring in to corral people under centralized governance, it's very important for people to find creative means to create communities like you are creating and be able to sustain each other in these new communities as they grow and hopefully outgrow the mainstream.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I thought of that like railing against the machine doesn't work. That's definitely a shadow of the rebel archetype. But creating something where you just forget to factor in those institutions because we are serving each other. To me, that's an enormous part of purpose, that we get into our lane, we do our work there. It is the very thing that people need from you, and gives you that basis for exchange. I'm a huge fan of entrepreneurialism. If you're reading my book, I say that word a lot. I'm discovering, and then that chance to make our life in our own image, and not have to abandon society and go live and eat sticks and twigs and that kind of thing, because I still like the some parts of the world are really good. I get to go to Texas this month, or I guess it's not quite May yet, but soon, and that's fantastic. That's beautiful. Get to show my son a different part of the world, and doing an interview with Alex Zeck, so that's going to be super fun.
Nice.
Yeah, yeah. Um, the masculine feminine, I was just noting also your message to men, which I appreciate. And it's really interesting because I worked with women almost exclusively for quite a time. And their much more difficult thing was to get out in the world and create something. So
Mhm.
when they move forward, there's always this pulling back, like, no, I need to heal more. I need to look at this. I need to go in these doors. I'm much more comfortable to stay in that perpetual self-work kind of a place rather than just put the thing out there and start to navigate some new reality. And
Mhm.
and then men, that's easier for them, but then they have the allergy, tend to have, on in general, the allergy towards the inner work and feeling. I think the feeling world is even more weaponized against men than even women. And so how do you see those two elements coming together the most powerfully? I ask you all kinds of hard questions today.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, no, but this is so foundational. This is one of the most important questions right now for all of us, because strong units bound by deep respect, God willing, love, and a common mission is an incredibly rebellious act, as I wrote in a recent Instagram post. It truly is, because in a system which is really incentivizing the lower aspects of our impulses, um, sexually, and validating our ego, and the transactional nature of relationships, which remain shallow but satisfy our dopamine rush, and et cetera, et cetera. The counter to that is actually creating more depth and moving through all the extreme challenges that are brought up within a relationship. So that's actually like a very powerful. There's a lot of discord that, of course, has been created between men and women, and some of it is manufactured, absolutely, and some of it, I think, is just a sign of our age of dissolution, in which there's more chaos brought to dynamics that we need to re-examine and bring to a higher order. And so right now it's not an easy task in this space to, I know things that men bring up that they have, that they hold against women. I know things that women have that they hold against men. They're both very valid, and at the same time the slate needs to always be cleaned up, and there needs to be forgiveness of the other, just the general other of manhood or womanhood, and there needs to be responsibility. And based on my understanding of the masculine, some men won't like me saying this, but truly, if a man takes responsibility for a relationship and really claims it and owns it, and that's not an easy task. And of course, sometimes there's a risk to do so with a partner that one may not entirely be sure will be up to par with that loyalty, trustworthiness, etc. It is a risk, but the man needs to take leadership and create the container, as as we're learning from Neo Tantra and other Shiva Shakti practices, which are actually quite wise, and they do weave well into our Western point of view. But the container that a man can hold, so that the beauty and the revitalizing force of the true feminine, and the strength and the encouragement and the vision giving life, that then creates more and really benefits from the structure and stability of the container, of the safety of vision, of sturdiness. And both of those, then of course they can relax by switching polarities sometimes, sometimes for short durations. Again, this is such a complex thing. I'm trying to condense my thoughts here in like a few minutes, but I would say responsibility. And if we have this greater umbrella of the greater mission of redeeming society, and without turning into zealots or fundamentalists, that will, I believe, maintain the relationship at a higher level, a higher order, because we know we're doing it as ensouled beings for a greater purpose. We're not doing it simply for our own pleasure, our own survival, though that is part of it, of course, and it always has to be, because we're human beings and we need to be fulfilled by love, by sex, by romance, by creating together. So those are all beautiful things that need to be always nurtured and be part of it. But we're also repopulating the earth with our own spirit and the spirit of other beings in the form of children, and we have to show up in the highest order possible. So a common mission is very, very important. And yeah, I do think men should take the responsibility for it's a common goal, but I just want to speak to men, since I'm a man. Like, there's a responsibility to be bringing back the purpose of the relationship, the mission, and the recommitment, because the vows have to be renewed. I don't remember this often, but I'll say it now. The vows need to be renewed daily. And those vows are like, why are we here? Why are we together? What are we doing? How are we showing up? And not fall into relational entropy.
I love that so much. I couldn't love it more. And I like how you said that, and I can't say this, but you did, that men would be good to assume responsibility for the relationship, right? If I'm getting your meaning correct, I also hold that philosophy that, say, for the king archetype, when they're one to many in a kingdom of any size, then the most powerful position for that king to be in is not going like, oh, you're wrong and you're bad and you go to jail and you don't get $200. But it's actually to say, oh, there's problems in my kingdom. I did it. I don't even know how I did it, but I did it. And I'm going to move forward with that, or even a domestic example from one of the authors that I've interviewed. It's like, I see a sock on the floor, and yeah, my son threw it there, but I see it, and I'm bothered by it. So I'm going to assume responsibility and go through life that if I see the problem, I'm going to be part of the solution to that problem, at least.
Sorry, I'm cut you off, but
no, you go ahead.
Yeah, and in a way, to use your example of the sock, it's also like you could speak to your son about the sock in a way that isn't, there's no blame or or ridicule, but it's an honest and authentic expression of how this sock could be handled another time. How you may not always have time to pick up the socks, but you also know that it's easy for people for him to slip his mind, right, and to forget that. And then there's sort of a connection when we're more artful with our communication and we take responsibility for being artful there and seeing the other. Then there's greater connection with each little rift. Actually, we connect more and more and more instead of separate. So that's really what the responsibility here means. It doesn't mean you are solely responsible for all actions and for all misdeeds. No, it's like we are responsible for bringing a higher order of experience to this moment. If we don't get the optimal reaction from the other, that's fine. That's it's another question, and maybe that maybe there are consequences to that. But yeah, the responsibility is there.
Nice. Yeah, the responsibility to bring a higher order. Spoken like a true king, by the way. That's the script right there. Amazing.
Right on.
Yeah, it really is. Well, this has been beautiful. Hello, Yvonne, sending love from Memphis, and glad you guys have been able to take part in this really wonderful interview. I hope I find more reasons to interact with you and your work for sure. Please do keep me posted. You're always welcome here. If you have any topics that you'd like to get out there. Yeah. Anything more that you would like to add or say before we start?
I feel complete. We covered so much. I feel quite expressed and very grateful to you for creating this, holding the space for us.
Oh, good. I'm so glad. Yeah, fantastic. Right. Well, it's been awesome. Really good. Thank you, everyone who's taken the time to tune in. My platforms are pretty censored. If you feel to share this out, that would be great. I often even forget to ask anyone for that, but they're really good. Thanks for everyone who joined on Rockfin. Hello, Annie D and Jennifer Pepler. Sorry I missed your missed your comments. She said, I really like Lubomir, great energy about him. He's someone you'll absolutely have to ask to come back for a part 2, she says.
Thank
So
you. Thanks
we're
for
in
the good
agreement.
words. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd love to come back and speak to you. Yeah.
Okay, fantastic. That'd be so good. Well, I hope you have a beautiful rest of your day, and everyone else does too. If you're not familiar with bethmartins.com, you can visit my website there and do a. I actually could have asked you. Maybe it's not too late to do the archetype quiz at my website. Did you see that at all?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so you can find out where you are on the path of purpose. And I've narrowed it down to 8 archetypes. I would actually love to send you a copy of my book if you're open to that.
Oh, I would love
I'll
that. Yeah.
get your mailing address. And I
Yes.
grossly oversimplified the inner world because I found it to be so overwhelmingly complex in a beautiful and enjoyable way. I love that. But knowing that the average person doesn't have a daily life like that to sit and study the internals. So the archetype is the archetype process. It's the archetypes of the hero's journey as I found it in myself. And then the quiz can show you where you are tending to default or more of your energy is focused. You right away see the gifts, you see the shadows, and it gives that place to begin working immediately. Because otherwise you just get your mind blown and you see everything, but you don't know how to even take one step towards resolving and healing in that arena.
Amazing. I'd love to do that quiz. I think it will be very helpful for me.
Okay, fantastic. Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll send you a direct link after the stream is done. And I think that's all for today. I'm a little bit mind wiped, which is good. I like being mind wiped, not thinking too much into the future, but there will be more interviews to come. We just in the House of Free Will hosted Dr. Berlando yesterday for a strange, I swear there's never been anything I've seen in the Truth or Freedom movement, specifically on bodybuilding. And the nature of how we are to embody and become strong and capable and have that courage, right? I think that's a big part of what we lack is the physical confidence that we can handle more than we've been told we can, or our experience is anyway. So that's something that people can still catch. All right, everyone, have a beautiful rest of your day. Lubomir, I will be in contact and get your address, and I'll send you a link to the quiz.
All right. Thank you, Beth.
Okay, you're very welcome. Okay, take care, everyone.
Bye.
Bye for now.